Good afternoon. Welcome you all to the online session on process management in operating systems. This is D. Mamta Rani, lecturer in computer science, Telangana Social Welfare Residential Degree College, Nizamabad. The learning outcomes of today's session is concept of process, process life cycle, process control block, process scheduling and CPU scheduling algorithms. So let us understand what is a process. The operating system keeps executing many programs, and the program that is under execution is called as a process. A program is a passive entity, whereas a process is an active entity which is currently being executed by the operating systems. Let us take an example. When we write a C or C++ program, the program that is stored on the disk is called as a application that is stored on the disk is called as a program, and when we execute after compilation, that becomes what is called as a process. So one of the operating system will be managing these processes for in a multi-programming operating system. Now let us see what is a process state diagram. When a process is being executed, it keeps changing the states, and the states are represented with the help of a process state diagram. There are actually 5 main stages in the process state diagram. One is new, ready, running, waiting and terminated states. We can also include the suspended state of a process when the process is we will study what exactly is the use of the suspended state of a process. First, let us understand each of the states of the process. The first state is the new state, that is the state of a process when it has been created and it is ready for execution once it is loaded into the memory. So the operating system maintains queue at this new state to hold all the processes which are ready to be brought into the memory, and that is what is called as the job queue. Next, the transition from the new to the ready state takes place when the process is brought into the memory and is ready for execution once the CPU is available. The ready state is a state of a process which is ready for execution once the CPU is assigned to that particular process. And again, here the operating system maintains a queue to hold all the processes which are in ready state waiting for the CPU or waiting for the turn to execute once the CPU is available. So the set of processes in the ready state are stored in a queue which is called as a ready queue. A transition from the ready queue to the running state takes place when the process is under execution. Once the CPU is allocated to the process, it starts its execution and the process is said to be in a running state. The running state is the state when the process is under execution. So when the process is executing, it may require some kind of I/O devices, or it may wait for an event to occur. In that case, the process moves from the running state to the waiting state or the blocked state. So a transition takes place from the running to the waiting state when the process is waiting for some kind of event to occur. And then we will see what is a waiting state. Waiting state is the state of a process when the process is waiting for some kind of event to occur. It could be waiting for some kind of a file or a printer or any kind of device. In that case, the process will be there in the waiting state. And once the event for which a process has been waiting occurs, then the transition of the process state changes from the waiting to the ready state, where it can resume its execution once the CPU is available. Then coming to the suspended state. A suspended state is a state of a process which has been temporarily moved out of the memory. If a waiting process is there in the CPU, if it is there in the memory, it does not make sense because the memory is being wasted with the process which is blocked on some kind of event. So what we do is we try to move the waiting or the blocked process out of the memory to the secondary storage, and that is what is called as a suspended state. So suspended blocked state is the state of a process which has been temporarily moved from the memory and is waiting for some kind of event to occur. So once that event occurs, or an I/O or any activity is occurring, then it will move from the suspended blocked state to the suspended ready state, where it is there in the secondary storage and the event for which it has been waiting has already occurred. So, the transition will take place from the suspended ready state to that of the ready state, and that will be done. So, the set of processes which are executing or which are there in the suspended state are all stored in the secondary memory. And there is another queue which is maintained by the operating system, which is there at the waiting stage, which holds all the processes which are waiting for some kind of an event or an IO. And finally, during the execution of a process, if it has completely executed successfully or due to abnormal termination, the problem will go from a running state to the terminated state. A transition from the running state to the ready state is also included, which will help the process to which will move the process from the running to the ready state if the timer expires or the dispatcher schedules a problem. Now that we have seen what is a process and process state diagram, we will now understand where and how the processes are managed. The processes are managed by the operating system. The primary goal of the modern operating system is to manage the process and to see that multiple processes are loaded into the memory, and for each process it allocates some devices or it allocates some memory, and it also provides facilities for the process to communicate with each other and share information. So, to maintain these processes, and the operating system maintains certain data structures which holds a complete information of the process, and this is what is called as the process control block. The process control block is a data structure which holds the information about the processes, and the operating system exerts complete control over the process with the help of the process control block. The entries in the process control block are process state, process priority, then process program counter, registers, memory memory limits, and the list of the open files. A process state, as we have discussed, could be ready, running, waiting, blocked, or suspended state. And the process ID is the unique identity assigned to the every process, and process is also assigned a priority which is stored in the process control block to determine the process priority with respect to some other process. And also we have the list of the memory limits, which helps us to ensure that a process does not access the address space of another process. So, only within that address space the process will be able to access. And then we have list of opening files, accounting information, etc. So, all that is required for maintaining the process by the operating system is there in the process control block. So, these process control block will help us to understand or manage help the operating system to manage these processes. So, the process control block is used for handling the processes by the operating system. So, let us now see the concept of process scheduling. So, we have already seen what is a process, the process state diagram, process control block, then coming to process scheduling. Process scheduling. Scheduling is one of the important function of a multi-programming operating system. What is a multi-programming operating system? A multi-programming operating system is the one where we can execute multiple programs at a time. That is, we will be able to execute different programs at the same instance of time, switching the CPU between one process and the other process. These the process in a uniprocess scheduling will be in a uniprocess scheduling. What happens is we have a single process, and when that process is waiting for an event, the CPU is idle and the most important time of the CPU is wasted. In order to utilize this CPU time, we use the multi-programming operating systems where we will be able to execute multiple programs, switching the CPU from one process to another process. So, the scheduling is the responsibility of the operating system. So, for managing the scheduling or for managing these processes, the operating system maintains different scheduling queues and makes use of the schedulers, and we'll see what are the different scheduling algorithms. Coming to the to start with the scheduling queues, as I've told you when discussing the process state diagram, at every stage during the process life cycle, the operating system maintains a queue. One is the job queue, the other one is ready queue, and the waiting queue. Making use of these things, these queues, the operating system will be moving the processes in and out of the queues. The operating system makes use fetches a process from the job queue whenever there is if it has to execute some program from the secondary storage, it will be brought into the main memory. So that will be there in the job queue, and ready queue holds the processes which are in the ready state, ready for execution once the CPU is available, and the waiting queue hold the list of the processes which are blocked or waiting for some kind of event to occur. So the for scheduling the processes, the operating system makes use of these queues. One is the job queue, the other one is the ready queue, and third one is the device queue or the IO queue. Then apart from these queues, it also makes use of the scheduler. So scheduler is a module which is used for scheduling the processes from the different queues, and there are 3 different types of schedulers. One is the long term scheduler, short term scheduler, and the medium term scheduler. So the long term scheduler is the one which does the process which is used for scheduling the processes from the job queue, that is they bring the process from the job queue and put them into the ready queue. So it is the responsibility of the long term scheduler to have a proper mix of the input IO bound and CPU bound process, that is a process which requires more of CPU and are called as CPU bound processes, and the processes which require more IO are called as the IO bound processes. So the long term scheduler should ensure that it makes a proper blend of the IO bound processes and the CPU bound processes, and it is the one which determines the degree of multiprogramming of a system. That is, it will decide how many programs can be active in a computer at a given instance of time. Coming to the medium term scheduler, as discussed in the process state diagram, that is when to bring a process from the secondary storage to the main memory. So which process to be brought in will be decided by the medium term scheduler. Medium term scheduler is responsible for performing the activity of swapping in and swapping out process from the main memory to the secondary memory, and this will be done to make space for the new process to come and to ensure the degree of multiprogramming is maintained. Then coming to the short term scheduler, which is also the called as a CPU scheduler, is one of the most important type of schedulers, where the process will be the processes in the ready queue will be assigned to the CPU, that is they will be able to execute once the CPU is available. So the short term scheduler plays a vital role in process execution, because it is the one that determines which process in the ready state or the ready queue will be executing next. So to assess to determine what are the processes which will be executing next, the operating system makes use of different scheduling algorithms, and the scheduling algorithms are categorized based on the different criteria. One is the throughput, rotational turnaround time, then you have the throughput, turnaround time, CPU utilization, waiting time, and the response time. Throughput is, let us now understand what is CPU utilization. CPU utilization is making effective use of the CPU, that is to ensure that the CPU is not idle, and it most of the times the CPU is executing some process or the other. When the process has CPU, when one process is waiting, we try to execute the other process and to see that the CPU time is effectively utilized. Then we move on to what is called as the second criteria, which is called as the throughput. Throughput is the measure of number of processes executed per unit time. The the number of processes which are executed. So throughput is the measure of the number of processes that are executing in a unit time. So we should ensure that the short-term scheduler will select the processes which can be executed in a shorter period of time, and the efficiency of your system increase. Turnaround time is the time between the submission of the process and its completion. Waiting time is the time the process waits in the different queues during its life cycle, and response time is the time elapsed between the submission and the moment it gets the first response as the output. So these are the different scheduling criteria, and the CPU scheduler should ensure that we must maximize CPU utilization and throughput and minimize turnaround time, waiting time and the response time. Now let us see the different scheduling algorithms. They are first come first served, then shortest process next, round robin scheduling and the priority scheduling. These scheduling algorithms are of two types. One is preemptive scheduling and the other one is the non-preemptive scheduling. A preemptive scheduling is the one in which once a process begins its execution, it can be interrupted during the execution and CPU can be assigned to the other process. Whereas a non-preemptive scheduling is a type of scheduling where once a CPU is assigned to the process, it will utilize the CPU for the complete time and you cannot interrupt the process in the middle. So we will now understand how the first come first served scheduling algorithm works. First come first served, as the name specifies, the process which arrives first in the ready queue will be the one that will be executed first, and then the process which is coming next, and so on and so on. As we can see in the diagram, the request will be processed in the order in which these people are entering to that particular counter. So in a first come first served scheduling, the processes are executed or scheduled in the order of their arrival time. Okay. So let us take an example to understand the process scheduling using FCFS. So in FCFS, as I told you, the processes will be scheduled based on their arrival time, the time in which they enter the ready queue. So I'll just take an example. So normally in any of the competitive examination, we will be given the process IDs, then the arrival times and the burst time of the processes. So the process IDs are like normally 1, 2, 3, and the arrival times will be given here 0, 2, 4, 6, 8 like this. Then you can have 3, 5, and then you take 2, 4 and 8. So if we are to schedule these processes using first come first serve, as I told you, the processes will be scheduled in the order in which they arrive, and to understand how they are scheduled, we make use of the Gantt chart. So Gantt chart is used for representing the process the way they are scheduled. So the process which has arrived at time 0 will be executed 1, and the burst time is the execution time, which is 3 units. So it will execute from 0 to 3 because the burst time of the process is 3 units. Then the next process that has arrived in the queue is process 2, that is P2, which will be executing from 3. Its burst time is 5, so it will execute from 3 to 8. Next process P3 will execute for how many units? Here the burst time is 4. The process executes from 8 to 8 plus 4, that is 12 units of time. Then process P4 will execute, and then the process P5 will be executing next. So P4 will execute from 8 to 12 to 8 units of time, that is 20, and P5 will execute till 22. I have taken a different example to see how the processes are executing. So to understand the performance of this algorithm, we will be calculating the wait time and the burst time. Wait time is the time the process has been waiting for its chance for execute, or the process waits in the different queues, and turnaround time is the time from the submission to its completion. If we take an example of for this process, let us calculate the wait time and turnaround times. WT is wait time, TAT is the turnaround time of the process. And for process P1, it has entered the ready queue at time 0 and execution began at 0. Therefore, it did not wait for any period of time. So, the wait time of the process P1 is 0. Coming to the process P2, the process began its execution at 3, but it has arrived at time 2. Therefore, the process P2 had been waiting in the queue for 1 unit of time. So, P2's wait time is equal to 1. Coming to process P3, the process P3 has begun its execution at 8 and FCFS is a non-preemptive scheduling algorithm. That is, once the CPU is allocated to a process, it will utilize the CPU for the complete execution time, then only it will release the process. Therefore, the process P3 will began its execution at 8, had arrived at 4, therefore, it waited for 4 units of time. Coming to process P4, the process P4 which has arrived at 6 has begun its execution at 12, waited for 6 units of time, and then process P5 which began its execution at 20 has arrived at 8. Therefore, the waiting time of process P5 is 12. And let us now calculate the turnaround time. Turnaround time is the time from the submission to its completion. So, process P1 has arrived at 0, finished at 0. Therefore, the turnaround time is 3 minus 0, which is equal to 3. Process P2 had finished its execution at 8, but had arrived at 2. Therefore, the turnaround time is 8 minus 2, which is equal to 6. And that of process P3, which has finished execution at 12 minus 4, which is equal to 8. And then process P4, which has begun its execution, finished its execution at 20, will now be and had arrived at 6. Therefore, the turnaround time is 14. And that of process P5, which is arrived at 8, has finished its execution at 22, then the turnaround time of this process is 22 minus 8 is 14. So, the average turnaround time is the sum total of the turnaround times by the number of processes. So, average waiting time is equal to 0 plus 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 12 by 5, and average turnaround time is equal to 3 plus 6 plus 8 plus 14 plus 14 by 5. So, in FCFS, we see that when a process is executing, it cannot be preempted during the execution. The disadvantage with FCFS scheduling is the convoy effect. That is, if a bigger process comes, for example, if a process which requires a CPU for 25 units of time, then all the small processes, P1 will be executing from 0 and P2 will be executing and P3. So, P2 and P3 will have to wait for its turn to execute. So, this phenomenon is called as the convoy effect, where the small process wait for one big process to complete. Okay. So, what is happening? The smaller processes are unnecessarily waiting, for which we will make use of the shortest job first scheduling algorithm. So, in shortest job first scheduling algorithm, the process which is smaller or whose execution time is smaller will be executed first, and the process whose burst time is more and which requires more amount of CPU will be executed next. But the problem with shortest job first is determining the next CPU burst. For example, let us take a set of processes whose arrival time. I will take three processes. And the burst time here is 2, then here if I take 40 and 0, 1, 2 and take this as 3. So, with shortest job first scheduling, the process whose burst time is the smallest will be executed first. So, to understand this scheduling, let us just take the Gantt chart and see how these processes are executed. So, process P1 has arrived at 0, it will execute from 0 to 2. Then process P2 will not execute. P2 has arrived at 1, but because the burst time of process P2, so by the time 2, there are two processes here, P2 and P3. Therefore, the process P3 will not be executing, P2 will not be executing because its burst time is the smaller. And we will now choose the process P3 from 2 to plus 3, that is for 5 units of time, then the process P2 will be executed. And it will execute for 40 units of time. So, 5 plus 40, which is equal to 45. The wait time and turnaround times of these processes can be calculated in the similar fashion. So, the process P1 has arrived at 0 and finished at 0, therefore, its wait time is 0. P2 has arrived at 1 and it waited for 4 units of time, and P3 has arrived at 2, it did not wait for any unit of time. So, P1's turnaround time is 2, P3's turnaround time is 5 minus 2, that is equal to 3, and that of process P2's turnaround time is 45 minus 1, which is equal to 44. So, the average turnaround time is this 2 plus 44 plus 3 by 3, and 0 plus 4 plus 0 by 3 is the average waiting time of the process. Now, we also have the preemptive version of SJF, which is called the shortest remaining time. In this case, when a process is executing, the process, if it will compare the burst time of the process and see which process remaining burst time is the shortest. So, if there is a process whose burst time is longer and a shorter process comes into picture, then we will be scheduling the process which is currently executed will be moved to the ready state, and the process whose burst time is smaller will be executed. So, with preemptive shortest job first scheduling algorithm, a process whose burst time is the smallest or the remaining burst time is the smallest will be chosen. So, the running process, if it has more amount of CPU time to be utilized, then that process will be made to wait and it will be interrupted, and the processor is allocated to the next process. Then we have the round robin scheduling algorithm. In a round robin scheduling algorithm, round robin is a type of scheduling algorithm which is same as first come first served with preemption. That is, in FCFS it is a non-preemptive version, whereas round robin is a preemptive version of FCFS, where the process here the processes are given a time quantum for execution. Every process will be utilizing the CPU for a certain period of time, and that is called as the time quantum. Once the time quantum expires, the CPU is allocated to the next process in the first come first serve order. If the process requires the CPU for a less than the time quantum, then it will utilize however time it needs. For that unit of time only, the process will be executing. So, to understand this round robin, let us take the example of two processes P1, P2 and P3, arrival time 0, 1, 2 and 8, 6 and 3. So, to execute these processes, we need to determine the time quantum. If the time quantum is 3 units of time, every process in round robin will be given 3 units for execution, and this 3 units of time which is given to every process is called as the time quantum or the time slice. This is basically used in time sharing systems, and this round robin provides better response time because every process will get a chance to execute. So, no process will be kept waiting. Unlike in FCFS, the process which comes late will have to wait, or the process which are smaller will have to wait, like convoy effect problem. In SJF, we have the case where the bigger processes will have to wait. Here in round robin scheduling, all the processes will be scheduled one after the other, P1, P2 and P3, will be executed. So P1 will be executed for 0 to 3, then P2 will execute from 3 to 6, P4 from 6 to 9, then again P1 will execute and next P2. How many units of time P1 has finished already? 8 minus 3, which is equal to 5, and here the process has executed for 3, it requires 3 more units of time. So P1 will execute for another 9 plus 3, that is equal to 12, then P2 will execute from 12 to 15, and then again process P5 will execute for another 2 units of time. So in round robin scheduling, the processes will be executed in the order in which they arrive, and they will be given a time quantum for which they are executing. So while calculating, we have to be very cautious about calculating the waiting time when you are using the preemptive scheduling, because the process P1, though it arrived at 0, it again executed from 0 to 3 and waited from 3 to 6. So when calculating the waiting time of P1, the waiting time is initially started at 0 and began execution at 0, arrived at 0, but from 3 to 9 it was waiting. So 6 units of time it is waiting, and again it waited for 3 units of time. So the total wait time of the process P1 is equal to 9. Similarly, we will be P3 has waited, execution began at 3, therefore the waiting time is equal to, for P2 this is 3 minus 2, which is equal to 1, and for process P3 the waiting time is, for P3 is this, and for P2 is, for process P2 it is 3 minus 1, which is equal to 2, and again from 6 to 9, that is 1, 3, which is equal to 4. So that is how the process has been, like we can be able to calculate the waiting time and the turnaround time of the processes. Now let us move on to what is called the other type of scheduling, priority scheduling. In priority scheduling, the processes are executed based on their priority. If there is a process P1 with priority 2 and P2 with a priority 1, then first process will be that is executed is P2, which has higher priority over the process P1. So P2 will execute first and P1 will be executing next. So in a priority scheduling, the processes are executed based on their priority. We will not be considering the arrival times or the burst time. Every process is assigned a unique identifier, like a priority value, based on which you will be executing those processes. But with priority scheduling, we see that in priority scheduling, if there is a high priority process executing, then all the low priority processes will have to wait. The low priority process will have to wait for the high priority process to finish its execution, which leads to a problem of starvation. What is starvation? Starvation is the state of a process which is waiting for the other process to complete. So in priority based scheduling, the low priority processes always wait for the higher priority process, and this leads to state called as starvation. So to overcome this problem, we use the aging technique, where after a certain period of time the priority of the process is increased to ensure that it gets a chance to execute. So to overcome this problem of starvation, we use the aging technique. So priority scheduling is again of two types. One is preemptive and non-preemptive priority scheduling. In non-preemptive priority scheduling, even if the low priority process is executing and high priority process enters the queue, it will not be given the chance to execute because it is non-preemptive. We cannot interrupt the process. So the low priority process will have to will be executing and the high priority process will have to wait. So once that finishes its execution, then the next process will be coming. Whereas in a preemptive version, if the low priority process is executing and high priority process enters a ready queue, the low priority process is interrupted and the CPU is allocated to the high priority process. So we have in today's session we have seen what is a process, the concept of process, the process state diagram, process controlling block, the process scheduling and the different scheduling algorithms, which is FCFS scheduling, shortest job first scheduling, round robin scheduling and the priority scheduling. These are very important for the examination point of view. Most of the competitive examinations, they give us the processes and ask us to calculate the average wait time and turnaround times. You can practice different problems at home and calculate the average waiting and turnaround times, and the scheduling criteria concept is also important. Calculate the average waiting and turnaround times. So, if these are the set of the processes P1, P2, P3 and P4 and their arrival times, take this as the homework, and arrival times is 0, 1, 2 and 4 and the burst time is 6, 3, 2 and 1. Calculate the compare the scheduling algorithms, schedule these processes and give a comparative study. We find that SJF is providing you the optimal solution, or the average waiting time is smaller in case of SJF. So, at the end of this session we were able to understand what is process scheduling and the scheduling algorithms. Thank you for watching. Stay home, stay safe.